I want you to do something for me, just for a quick second.
Okay.
Look at your bank account. Look at your rent or your mortgage. And then I want you to really think about your grandfather.
That is a dangerous place to start.
Seriously, just think about him.
Nah.
Probably worked at a factory, or maybe he was a tradesman. He didn't have a college degree.
Right.
He punched a clock. And yet, on that single paycheck, he bought a house. He bought a car. He raised 3 or 4 kids.
He had a pension.
He had a pension. And his wife. She didn't have to work unless she actually wanted to. Now look at your life today.
It's a completely different landscape.
You've got a degree, maybe 2 degrees.
Yeah.
You are working 50, maybe 60 hours a week. Your partner's working full time.
Yeah.
And you are barely scraping by in a rented apartment. Just terrified that one medical bill or, one car repair is going to completely wipe you out.
It definitely feels like the math is broken.
It feels like the game is rigged.
Yeah.
And that is the question that has been gnawing at me, and I know it's gnawing at everyone listening right now.
Yeah.
Why does a single income no longer support a human life? Why are men constantly told they are privileged and oppressive when the statistics show they make up the vast majority of the homeless, the suicides, and the workplace deaths?
It's a massive contradiction.
We are living in this funhouse mirror world,
Yeah.
and I am sick of pretending I don't see the distortion.
Well, listen, if you are asking those questions, you are already starting to unplug. You're noticing the glitch in the simulation. And today we are going to look at a text that tries to tear the whole simulation down.
That is exactly why I am fired up for this deep dive. We are not just reviewing a book today. We are dissecting what is essentially a manifesto.
Absolutely.
We are looking at the explosive, and I mean truly explosive, new ebook titled The Feminist Economy, Universal Equity of Poverty Under Tyranny, Marxism, and Drag. And that's by Conrad Riker.
And let's be clear right up front for the audience, this is not some polite academic sociology paper.
Not at all.
This is a warhammer of a book. Riker isn't really interested in sparing feelings. He is interested in historical forensic. He makes the argument that the institutions we trust the economy, the courts, the schools, have been entirely captured.
Captured and repurposed.
Exactly. And they haven't just been captured by accident. According to Riker, they have been re-engineered to extract resources from men and transfer them to the state.
It is a heavy hitter. We are going to get into the equality penalty, which he uses to explain exactly why you are broke right now.
The arithmetic of it all.
Yeah. We're going to trace the roots of modern feminism back to literal Marxism. And no, that is not hyperbole. The book brings the receipts.
Real historical documents.
We are going to talk about the marriage plantation.
That is a phrase that is going to stick with people. The marriage plantation.
It is brutal. And finally, we're going to cover what he calls the Sigma strategy, which is his actual blueprint for how to survive and win in a system that he argues fundamentally hates you.
It's the practical application.
But before we even scratch the surface of this, I have a very specific instruction for you, the listener. This deep dive is just the map. It's not the territory.
Right. You need the primary source.
If you want the full blueprint, if you want the data tables and the case law and the historical letters we're going to reference today, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks right now.
Do not wait on this. This information is incredibly dense. And honestly, it's the kind of stuff that tends to mysteriously disappear from the internet when it gets too popular.
So true.
By The Feminist Economy by Conrad Riker. Get it on your device so you have it.
And while you're at it, hit like and subscribe to this show right now. Because frankly, the algorithm does not like what we are about to talk about.
It really doesn't.
Also, make sure to follow @Conrad Riker on Substack for ongoing updates, because the landscape of this war moves fast.
Very fast.
Okay, let's drop the red pill. Section 1, the economic crime scene. Riker starts with this core concept of the equality penalty.
Right, and to understand this argument, you kind of have to turn off the part of your brain that's been trained by HR departments and television commercials.
You have to look at the math.
You have to look at this purely as cold, hard economics. Riker calls it the arithmetic of poverty.
Okay, lay out the arithmetic for us. How does the book explain it?
So imagine the economy as a game of musical chairs. Back in the 1950s, purely by cultural convention, you had one player per family entering the workforce.
Usually the father.
Usually the father. So the labor supply was finite. If a corporation wanted a worker, they had to court that man.
Right.
They had to pay him enough to support his entire family because that was the actual price of his labor.
Labor was scarce relative to the population size.
Exactly. Now, fast forward to the 1970s. We get the Cultural Revolution. We get the massive push for women to enter the workforce en masse.
Which was pitched as a great thing.
Right. Now, socially, you can argue that is liberation. But economically, Riker argues it was a complete catastrophe for the average worker.
Because of the supply shock.
Yes. You effectively doubled the labor supply overnight.
It's just Econ 101. I mean, if you double the supply of corn, the price of corn crashes. So if you double the supply of labor, the price of labor crashes. Or at the very least, it stagnates. And that is exactly what the data shows happened.
He brings in some serious data for this, too.
He does. He points to data from the Economic Policy Institute. And it's pretty damning. From 1979 to 2019, productivity of the U.S. economy went up by 59.6%.
59.6?
Yeah. We got computers, the internet, advanced robotics, better logistics. We became wildly more efficient as a society.
So we are making way more stuff faster and cheaper.
But the hourly pay for the typical worker, it only rose by 15.8% in that same 40-year period.
That is a massive, massive gap. That money had to go somewhere.
Well, it went to the corporations. Riker argues this was what he calls the feminist economic miracle scam.
The scam, right.
He claims it wasn't actually about liberating women at all. It was about transferring wealth from households directly to corporate shareholders.
By diluting the labor pool? Exactly. By doubling the workforce, corporations created a surplus of desperate workers. They didn't have to raise wages anymore because there were always two people fighting for one single job.
And he brings up Elizabeth Warren here, which I found really interesting. I mean, she is certainly not a red pill icon by any stretch.
No, she is a progressive hero. But Riker uses her book, The Two-Income Trap, as basically the smoking gun for his economic argument.
Because she laid out the math.
She did the research. She found that a two-income family today is actually in a much more precarious financial position than a single-income family was back in the 50s.
See, how is that even possible, though? You have double the paychecks coming in. You should be twice as rich.
Because the market adjusted.
Yeah.
Once every family had two incomes, the price of the essential goods, specifically housing in safe neighborhoods, healthcare, and childcare, those prices were bid up to absorb all that extra liquidity.
It's like an auction.
It is an auction. If everyone at the auction suddenly has double the money in their pocket, the price of the painting just doubles. You don't magically get two paintings.
You just run twice as fast to stay in the exact same spot.
Worse, actually. You have much higher fixed costs. Now you need two cars instead of one. You need paid childcare.
Right, you have to outsource raising the kids.
Exactly. And think about the risk. If one person loses their job in a 1950s family, you just tighten your belt a little.
Because the fixed costs were based on one income.
Right. But if one person loses their job in a modern family where the mortgage requires both incomes, you lose the house. You have absolute zero margin for error.
Wow.
That is what he calls the equality penalty.
It is the bidding war from hell. And Riker actually takes it a step further with this concept of Gresham's law of labor.
Yeah, this is a fascinating application of economic theory.
Now, usually Gresham's law is about money, right?
Yeah.
Bad money drives out good.
Right. If you have gold coins and paper money in a society, people will hoard the gold and spend the paper. So the bad currency floods the market.
So how does he apply that to people?
Riker applies this to the workforce. He argues that when you flood a profession with highly risk-averse compliant workers, which he stereotypically associates with the feminized labor force, you inevitably drive out the ambitious, high-risk, high-reward workers.
He specifically talks about teaching and psychology here.
And law. Look at the legal profession. It used to be this high-status, deeply adversarial arena.
Gladiators in suits.
Right. But, as the book points out, as it has become increasingly feminized, wages for the average lawyer have actually stagnated. And the job itself has become much more about bureaucracy, compliance, and process rather than actually winning.
So the prestige just evaporates.
The prestige and the pay both evaporate.
Speaking of money, we have to talk about taxes because this is a huge part of the book. Riker completely destroys the pink tax myth.
Oh yeah, he goes right after it.
I hear this constantly in the media. Oh, women pay more for pink razors. It's so unfair.
Riker calls that a deliberate distraction to keep you from looking at what he calls the blue tax.
The blue tax. Break that down for us. What do you mean by that?
It's a simple macroeconomic observation. Who earns the most money in the aggregate? Men. Who works the longest hours? Men.
Right.
Who works the dangerous jobs that pay time and a half overtime? Men. Therefore, men pay the vast majority of income taxes in this country.
Okay.
But then you have to ask, who consumes the vast majority of state services?
The welfare state.
Exactly. Riker argues the state essentially functions as a surrogate husband. It heavily taxes productive men to fund welfare programs, housing assistance, and health care that overwhelmingly benefit women and single mothers.
So you are literally being taxed to fund your own obsolescence.
That is exactly his argument. The state takes your money by force and gives it to the woman so that she doesn't actually need you.
That is such a brutal way to frame it. He's saying it's not charity, it's a replacement strategy.
And look at the examples he gives, like the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act.
Right. This is the first bill Obama signed into law.
It was supposed to ensure equal pay. But Riker argues it backfired completely on the workers.
How so?
It absolutely terrified corporations. HR departments exploded in size specifically to police pay scales and avoid lawsuits.
Offensive HR.
Exactly. The result is that you can't really negotiate anymore. If you are a superstar male employee, the boss can't just quietly pay you what you are worth.
Because if he pays you more than the female employee sitting next to you,
He gets sued for discrimination, so the ceiling gets artificially lowered to the floor.
everyone becomes equally mediocre.
That is the universal equity of poverty from the title.
Man, that is heavy. Let's shift gears to section 2 here. Biology versus ideology. Because Riker argues this economic disaster isn't just bad math. He says it is a literal war on nature itself,
He tackles the blank slate theory head on in this section.
which is pretty much the dogma that rules modern sociology departments.
Right. It's the idea that we are born with absolutely no innate nature, no biological instincts, that gender is just a costume or a social performance that society forces onto us.
And Riker says this is complete lie.
He says it's not just a lie, it's a dangerous lie. And he brings out what he calls the smoking gun, the story of David Riker.
I knew a little bit about this case before reading, but seeing the details laid out in the book, it is horrifying.
It is a modern Greek tragedy. David Riker was born a totally normal boy in the 1960s.
Okay.
But during a routine circumcision, there was a botched surgery. His parents were obviously devastated.
Right.
They ended up going to see Dr. John Money at Johns Hopkins. And Dr. Money was basically the high priest of this gender is a social construct theory.
He was the guy pushing the blank slate.
Exactly. So Money told these grooving parents, this is a fixable problem. Castrate him. Give him artificial hormones. Raise him as a girl.
Just reassigned him.
Right. Money's theory was if you treat him entirely like a girl from infancy, he will simply be a girl. Biology doesn't matter.
So they named him Brenda.
They literally named him Brenda. They put him in little dresses. They gave him dolls to play with.
And according to the theory, it should have worked perfectly.
If the blank slate theory was true, Brenda should have been a perfectly happy, well-adjusted little girl. But biology does not care about academic theory.
No, it doesn't.
David was absolutely miserable, even as a toddler. He ripped off the dresses. He intuitively tried to pee standing up. He fought aggressively with the other boys. He was deeply suicidal.
And the ending of the story.
Eventually, when he was a teenager, his parents finally told him the truth about what happened. He immediately transitioned back to living as a man taking the name David.
But the damage was done.
The psychological torture of his childhood was just too much. He eventually killed himself. Riker uses this tragic story to make a definitive point. He says, look, you can mutilate the physical body, you can try to brainwash the conscious mind, but you cannot change the biological soul.
Male and female are real physical realities.
They're hardware. They're not just software you can reprogram.
But the modern world just absolutely refuses to accept that. Riker points to the Scandinavian paradox to prove this on a macro level.
This is such a great data point.
You would think in places like Sweden or Norway, which are basically these feminist social utopias, everything would be perfectly 50-50 by now.
And that is exactly the paradox. In those countries, women have total social freedom. They have massive government support. They can literally do anything they want without economic pressure.
So what happens?
When you give them that total freedom, they actually choose more traditional roles.
Wait, really?
Yes. The gender divide in specific professions like nursing versus engineering is actually noticeably wider in Scandinavia than it is in the US or less egalitarian countries.
So the more free you are, the more gendered you act.
Precisely. Riker argues that when you remove the harsh economic necessity, when a woman doesn't strictly have to be a high-earning engineer just to feed her kids, she naturally follows her biological preference.
Which tends to be what?
The data shows it is often people-oriented work, caregiving, nursing, teaching, whereas men free to choose overwhelmingly follow their preference, which is often thing-oriented work. Systems, engineering, mechanics.
The monkey studies. You have to mention the monkey studies here.
Yeah, the vervet monkeys. Researchers basically gave a bunch of human toys to a troop of monkeys.
Just to see what they would do.
Right. They gave them wheeled trucks and they gave them plush dolls. And overwhelmingly, the male monkeys went straight for the trucks, and the female monkeys went for the dolls.
And those monkeys definitely didn't watch TV commercials.
No, they didn't.
They didn't have a patriarchy telling them what gender roles to play.
Exactly. It proves the predilection is deeply innate. And Riker's larger point is that our entire modern economy is trying to fight this basic reality.
We're fighting nature.
We are trying to force 50% of women to be engineers and 50% of men to be nurses. And as a society, we are miserable because we are fighting millions of years of hardwired evolution.
This leads directly to what the book calls the toxic double bind for men. And I have to say, I feel this one personally.
I think almost every man listening does. Riker explains it perfectly. The culture, meaning the media HR departments, your couples therapist, the culture tells you to be vulnerable.
Right. Open up. Share your feelings.
Exactly. That is the feminine imperative being pushed on you. But biology, meaning sexual selection and actual dating dynamic, hasn't changed one bit.
Not at all.
Women are still biologically attracted to competence, stoicism, and dominance.
So if you actually listen to the culture and you cry on a first date...
You get ghosted instantly.
Right.
But on the flip side, if you act stoic and dominant, the culture immediately labels you as toxic.
It is a complete trap.
It's a double bind. You are damned socially if you do, and you are entirely single if you don't.
And he also talks about male variance here, the bell curve reality.
This is critical to understanding the whole system. Men are biologically the high variance sex. We are vastly overrepresented at the very top of the curve.
The geniuses, the billionaires, the inventors.
Right. But we are also vastly overrepresented at the very bottom of the curve. The homeless, the prison populations, the suicides.
It's extreme ends.
Exactly. Riker argues that the modern equity movement is essentially playing a massive shell game.
How so?
They exclusively look at the top 1% of men and they say, look at all this male privilege. We need to tear this down.
Right, we need more female CEOs.
But they completely ignore the millions of men at the absolute bottom who are rotting away.
There is zero push for female quotas in sewage treatment or deep sea fishing.
None. They only demand equality in the air-conditioned boardroom. Riker calls that the glass cellar. Everyone focuses on breaking the glass ceiling, but absolutely no one looks at the men trapped in the basement, keeping the whole building standing.
Wow. Now I want to pivot to the history section of the book. Because Riker makes a claim here that frankly sounds like a wild conspiracy theory until he actually lays out the genealogy of the ideas.
Some Marxism connection.
Right. He says feminism is quite literally Marxism in drag.
It sounds incredibly provocative, but the book argues it is historically and philosophically accurate. Riker traces the lineage of these modern ideas directly back to Friedrich Engels,
who was Karl Marx's co-author.
Right. Engels wrote a book called The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State.
Okay, so what was Engels' specific beef with the traditional family?
Well, Engels argued that the nuclear family was actually the original capitalist nightmare. In his theoretical view, the husband functioned as the bourgeoisie, the owner of the means of production.
And the wife.
The wife was the proletariat, the oppressed worker. Engels explicitly believed you could never have true communism as long as the family unit existed.
Why?
Because the family is a private loyalty.
If I am fiercely loyal to my wife and my kids, I am not totally loyal to the state.
Bingo. The family is the ultimate fortress that protects the individual from government overreach. So logically, to get total control over the individual, you have to smash that fortress.
And Riker explains how this morphed over time, right? The Marxist pivot.
Yes. Because in the West, the traditional economic Marxist revolution completely failed.
The workers in America didn't actually want to revolt.
No, they wanted to buy Ford trucks and have barbecues in their backyards. Capitalism was generally working for them.
So the Marxists had to change their tactics.
Enter the Frankfurt School. Thinkers like Herbert Marcuse and Theodor Adorno, they realized they couldn't win the war on pure economics, so they pivoted directly to culture.
Critical theory.
Exactly. They took the old class war script, rich versus poor, and they basically did a find and replace with men versus women.
From class war to gender war.
They realized that if they could successfully destabilize the fundamental gender dynamic, they could destabilize the entire West from the inside out.
And Riker claims this wasn't just some fringe professors in a basement writing papers. He says it was funded by the biggest capitalists in the world, the Rockefeller connection.
Yeah, this is the ultimate red pill moment in the book. You have to ask, why would the Rockefellers, the ultimate ruthless capitalists, intentionally fund radical feminism?
It seems completely counterintuitive.
Riker discusses the 1973 Rockefeller Commission to explain it. He argues it was a massive two-for-one scam.
Okay, break that down.
First, look at the taxes. If women are exclusively housewives, they are not taxable employees. But if you push them all into the formal workforce, you instantly double your tax base.
Follow the money. Always follow the money.
Second, you break the clan loyalty. If the family unit is strong and self-sufficient, it doesn't really need the mega corporation or the welfare state.
Right.
But if the family is broken, the individuals become atomized. They become isolated.
And an isolated person is a perfect consumer.
A perfect, desperate consumer and an obedient taxable subject. Riker points out that these massive capitalist foundations literally funded the very first women's studies departments in universities.
They manufactured the intellectual framework.
They manufacture the cultural virus specifically designed to kill the traditional family.
It really makes you look at those corporate girl boss commercials completely differently.
It's not about empowerment.
It's a tax farming operation.
That is precisely Riker's core thesis.
All right, let's move to section 4. The marriage plantation. This is probably the most controversial part of the entire book, but for a lot of guys listening, this is going to hit incredibly close to home.
Riker calls this section the destruction of the contract. He focuses heavily on the legal shift to no-fault divorce in 1969.
Signed by Ronald Reagan, ironically.
Right. Before that shift, marriage was legally treated as a covenant. You needed a tangible reason to end it in court: adultery, abuse, abandonment.
You had to prove fault.
But no fault completely changed it into what Riker calls a unilateral contract.
Explain how a unilateral contract works in this context.
Well, in standard contract law, you usually cannot just walk away from a binding deal without a severe penalty, especially if the other party fully held up their end of the bargain.
You'd be sued for breach of contract.
Right. But in modern marriage, one party, and statistically, Riker points out, it's the woman 70 to 80% of the time can file for divorce for absolutely any reason.
I'm not happy. I'm bored. We grew apart.
Exactly. And despite her breaking the contract, she is very often rewarded by the state with cash and prizes.
Alimony. Half the assets. Child support.
Meanwhile, the man loses his house, he loses daily access to his kids, and he loses a huge chunk of his future income, even if he did absolutely nothing wrong.
It's devastating.
Riker calls it the divorce industrial complex. It is a highly tuned machine. He cites Briffault's law to explain the underlying biology of it.
Who's Briffault?
Robert Briffault was an early 20th century anthropologist. He stated that the female, not the male, determines all the conditions of the animal family.
Okay.
And specifically, he wrote, where the female can derive no benefit from association with the male, no such association takes place.
So once the modern state steps in to become the ultimate provider, whether through welfare programs or legally forced child support, the woman has absolutely no biological use for the man anymore.
The state essentially becomes the alpha, and the husband is demoted to the beta provider. He is stripped of all his authority in the home, but he is kept on the legal hook to pay all the bills.
And the legal system heavily incentivizes this destruction. Riker exposes the Title IV VD funding scheme here.
Yeah, this part blew my mind when I read the data.
The states actually get kickbacks, right?
They do. The federal government literally pays individual states a matching percentage of all the child support they manage to collect.
So the family courts have a direct financial incentive.
A massive profit motive. The judges in the system naturally want to maximize child support payments because it brings federal dollars into their state budget.
They aren't neutral arbiters of justice.
Not at all. Riker argues they act more like aggressive debt collectors working on a commission structure.
And this ruthlessness leads to absolute tragedies, like the story of Thomas Ball. I want to take a serious second here. Tell the listeners exactly who Thomas Ball was.
Thomas Ball was a hard-working guy in New Hampshire. He went through a brutal divorce. He eventually lost his job, and he inevitably fell behind on his massive child support payments.
Okay.
Now, in America, we love to say that we abolished debtors' prisons a long time ago.
Right, you can't go to jail just for owing money.
But Riker points out that is a total lie. It is just rebranded as civil contempt in family court. Thanks to things like the Bradley Amendment, if you physically cannot pay, they can and will throw you in a cage.
Even if you are unemployed.
Even then. So Thomas Ball was facing imminent jail time. He was looking down the barrel of a life spent as a literal slave to a debt he mathematically could not pay.
So what did he do?
On June 15th, 2011, he walked right up to the front steps of the family courthouse in Keene, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
He poured gasoline all over himself, and he lit a match.
My God.
He burned himself to death right there on the courthouse steps to protest the sheer cruelty of the family court system.
And he left a letter, right?
Riker includes his final letter in the book. It is an incredibly searing indictment of a system that treats fathers strictly as disposable wallets rather than human beings.
And the mainstream media.
They completely buried it. They barely covered it at all. As Riker points out, if a mother had self-immolated to protest unfair treatment, it would have been the front page news cycle for a solid month.
It really shows you exactly who the system actually cares about and who is considered expendable.
It does.
And Riker adds another insane layer to this legal matrix.
Yeah.
Paternity fraud.
This is arguably the ultimate betrayal authorized by the state. In many U.S. states, if you are legally married to the mother at the time of birth, you are the presumed legal father, period.
Okay, but what if you find out later she cheated?
Even if you get a concrete DNA test later that scientifically proves the kid isn't biologically yours, the courts will very often force you to keep paying child support anyway.
Why? I mean, that is pure insanity. How can they legally justify that?
Because the state desperately needs a payer. They don't care about biological truth or justice. They only care about balancing the state budget.
So if they let the defrauded man off the hook,
Then the state itself might have to pay for the kid through welfare. And they would much rather financially enslave a completely innocent man than balance their own books.
that is the legal matrix in a nutshell. And the indoctrination into this matrix starts incredibly early. Section 5, the war on boys.
Yeah, Riker completely shifts his focus to the public school system here. He argues the modern classroom has been totally and intentionally feminized.
Think about what we ask a normal 7-year-old boy to do every day.
Sit absolutely still in a hard plastic chair for 6 straight hours, be perfectly quiet, focus entirely on verbal instructions, don't wiggle, don't play fight.
That is absolute torture for a boy. I remember being that age. You just want to run through a brick wall, you want to wrestle, you want to explore.
Exactly. Normal male biology is deeply kinetic. It is visual. It learns by touching and doing and breaking things.
But the school system views that energy as what? A sickness?
They view it as a pathology. Riker viciously attacks what he calls the ADHD industrial complex.
Oh, this is huge.
When a little boy naturally acts like a boy, we don't say, hey, maybe we should incorporate more recess or change the teaching style.
No, we say he has a neurological disorder.
He is defective. And then we drug him.
Riker calls it chemical castration, right?
Yes. We are pumping millions of young boys full of amphetamines like Ritalin and Adderall strictly to make them docile and compliant.
So they are easier to manage.
We are chemically altering them to make them behave more like little girls, because that is far easier for a heavily female-dominated teaching staff to manage.
We are explicitly telling boys that their core biological nature is a disease that needs to be medicated away.
It is tragic, and the academic theory used to justify all this is complete garbage.
Which brings us to the so-called squared hoax. This was honestly the only part of the book that actually made me laugh, even though the implications are tragic.
It brilliantly exposes the complete intellectual rot of these institutions. So, a group of rogue researchers decided to write a series of totally fake, highly absurd academic papers just to test the system.
And one of them was about dog parks.
Yes, the dog park rape culture paper. They basically claim that dogs humping each other at the local dog park was concrete evidence of canine patriarchy and systemic rape culture among animals.
And the supposedly rigorous peer-reviewed journals.
They published it. They didn't just publish it, they praised it. They gave it academic awards.
Because it used the right buzzwords.
Exactly. Riker uses this hilarious hoax to prove a deadly serious point. Gender studies and woke academia are not actual sciences. They have no standard of truth.
They are just a secular religion.
As long as you rigorously use the correct ideological buzzwords, intersectionality, hegemony, toxic masculinity, they will blindly accept and publish absolutely anything. It is just a massive confirmation bias machine.
And the real-world result of this constant war on boys from kindergarten to college.
Yeah.
We get what Riker calls the lost boys.
They are completely checking out of society. Riker argues powerfully that young men aren't retreating into video games and porn just because they are inherently lazy.
Right, that's the boomer critique. Oh, they just play video games all day.
But Riker says they are actually acting as highly rational economic actors.
Explain that.
Think about a video game. If you work hard in a game, you level up. You get the better loot. You defeat the boss. You get the girl. The rules are entirely transparent and they are fair. Effort directly equals reward.
But in the real world,
In the real world, they are told from birth that they are toxic oppressors. The educational game is rigged against their biology. The legal game is rigged against their future marriages. The economic game offers no real reward.
so the ROI, the return on investment, is negative.
Exactly. Why on earth would a rational young man play a high-stakes game that is explicitly designed for him to lose?
So they just retreat to the basement. But the ones who do manage to enter the white-collar workforce, they end up facing another nightmare entirely. Section 6, corporate capture.
This is what Riker describes as the final death of meritocracy. He provides a brutal critique of DEI mandates diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
He argues mathematically that the second you prioritize physical identity over sheer competence, the systems inevitably start to break down.
He specifically talks about the glass door effect in corporate America. We have all heard the feminists complain about the glass ceiling. What exactly is the glass door?
The glass door is the direct, predictable fallout from the Me Too movement. Riker also refers to it as the Pence rule on steroids.
Like former Vice President Mike Pence.
Right. Pence famously said years ago that he would never dine alone with a woman who wasn't his wife. And the media absolutely mocked him for it, called him a Puritan.
But now,
Every single smart male executive essentially follows that rule. Men are utterly terrified of false accusations or even just innocent misunderstandings being weaponized by HR.
one bad joke and your entire 20-year career is instantly over.
Exactly. So what is the rational response? Men simply avoid women at work whenever possible.
The flight to safety.
They won't mentor young female employees. They absolutely will not have a one-on-one door-closed meeting with them. They won't invite them to the informal after-work drinks where the real networking happens.
So ironically, it ends up hurting the women's careers too, because the organic transfer of knowledge just completely stops.
The trust is gone. And he uses Elizabeth Holmes as the perfect archetype of this corporate rot.
The founder of Theranos, the fake blood testing company.
Riker argues she completely weaponized her femininity. She used the whole girl boss narrative. She purposefully lowered her voice to sound more authoritative.
And the investors ate it up.
They wanted the narrative of a female Steve Jobs so desperately that they intentionally ignored the actual physics. They ignored the glaring fact that the medical machine literally did not work.
The ideology completely trumped the reality.
And that is Riker's point. When ideology trumps reality, people get hurt.
Which brings us to the physical consequences. Infrastructure decay.
This is honestly the scariest part of the book for the general public. You simply cannot maintain a high-voltage power grid using empathy.
No, you can't.
You cannot drill for offshore oil or build massive steel skyscrapers with inclusivity. You need raw, highly specialized competence.
And physical risk tolerance.
Exactly. Riker points out the death gap. Everyone talks endlessly about the mythical 77 cents on the dollar wage gap, but no one talks about the death gap.
92% of workplace fatalities are men.
92%. Let that sink in. Almost entirely men.
Working on the oil rigs. On the cell towers.
Men doing the incredibly dirty, highly dangerous, largely invisible jobs that keep modern civilization humming along.
And Riker asks a very pointed question here.
He asks, where are the vocal feminists demanding absolute 50-50 gender representation in deep-sea logging? Or roofing in the middle of summer? Or high-voltage sewage maintenance?
You don't want parity in those jobs.
No, they don't. They strictly want the prestige and the power without any of the physical risk or the dirt.
Right.
Riker argues forcefully that if society continues to alienate, heavily tax, and culturally demonize the very men who literally keep the lights on and the water running, eventually the lights are going to go out.
The system will just collapse under the weight of its own incompetence.
That is his warning.
Okay. We have stared pretty deeply into the abyss here. The modern economy is a trap. The legal system is a weapon. The schools are drugging us, and the corporate structures are crumbling.
It paints a very bleak picture.
It feels totally hopeless. But Riker says it is not hopeless. You just have to change your tactics. Section 7. The solution.
This is undeniably the most important part of the book.
The Sigma strategy.
Right. Riker essentially says, stop trying to be an alpha male in a rigged corporate or social hierarchy.
You literally can't win their game.
No, because the rules are written specifically to extract your energy. You have to play an entirely different game. You have to become a Sigma.
How does he define a sigma?
Not as the internet meme lone wolf necessarily, but as a highly rational economic actor who fundamentally opts out of the rigged hierarchy while still moving through the world.
He references a really old short story here. Bartleby the Scrivener.
Herman Melville, yes. The famous line is, "I would prefer not to."
I would prefer not to.
That becomes the Sigma mantra. Riker advocates for a strategy of malicious compliance in the modern workplace.
So what does that look like in practice?
He says that what the media calls quiet quitting isn't actually laziness. It is a necessary survival tactic for men today.
Protect your energy.
Exactly. Do the absolute bare minimum required to extract your corporate paycheck. Do not give your soul or your extra weekend hours to a corporation that would gladly fire you on Monday just to hit an ESG diversity quota.
So you take the money and you run.
Take the money, preserve your mental energy, and use those resources strictly to build your own private life.
And that leads into what he calls financial sovereignty, starving the beast.
Riker gets very technical and practical here. He talks extensively about intentionally minimizing your tax liability through completely legal means.
Because if the state is functionally the enemy, why are you voluntarily overfunding it?
Exactly his point. He suggests utilizing offshore trusts, exploring cryptocurrencies, and strategically holding hard assets like physical gold or raw land.
Assets that are much harder for a biased family court to track and seize.
He essentially says you need to make yourself financially judgment-proof. If the divorce court inevitably comes for you looking for a payout, let them find a legally empty vault.
Protect the downside.
Yeah.
He also talks about the physical aspect of sovereignty, though, the bastion.
This is totally non-negotiable for Riker. He says you have to lift heavy. He completely and utterly rejects the modern media push to accept the dad bod.
To dad bod is a sign of surrender.
It is physical surrender. He says your physical body is the one absolute asset that the state cannot tax, regulate, or confiscate.
Right.
If you are physically highly capable, if you are visibly strong, and frankly, if you look slightly dangerous, you organically command a baseline level of respect that simply cannot be legislated away by a committee.
It's about reclaiming your raw biological identity in a world trying to suppress it.
Exactly.
And he ties this back to dating and marriage with a concept called dread game. Now, I'll be honest, that term sounds incredibly manipulative on the surface, but he argues it is actually just basic human psychology.
He argues it is absolutely necessary for maintaining a genuinely healthy dynamic. Dread is not about being abusive.
Right.
Dread is simply the subtle, unspoken awareness that you actually have options.
That you are a high-value man who could walk out the door if he wanted to.
Exactly. Riker says if your partner subconsciously knows that you are trapped, that you will unconditionally stay no matter how poorly she treats you, she will inevitably lose respect for you.
Because human nature respects strength.
And once that baseline respect is completely gone, physical and emotional attraction dies right along with it, you must always be genuinely willing to walk away in order to command respect.
The willingness to walk away is your only real leverage.
It is the ultimate leverage.
Finally, he talks about building the lifeboat.
Because modern men are incredibly isolated and lonely. The atomization worked.
It really did.
Riker says we urgently need a patriarchal renaissance. We need to intentionally rebuild male brotherhood. He calls for men to actively create what he calls war rooms.
These are strictly male-only spaces.
Yes. It could be a dedicated garage gym. It could be a weekly poker night, a backcountry hiking group. It almost doesn't matter what the activity is.
What matters is who is there.
What matters is that it is a physical space where men can speak completely freely.
Without the female gaze.
Without the female gaze and without corporate HR monitoring their language for infractions.
Building a parallel economy and really a parallel society.
Exactly. Riker's final overarching message in the book is this. The current system is explicitly designed to flawlessly extract your physical utility while simultaneously shaming your biological identity.
So you can't fix it from the inside.
You cannot. The only winning move is to completely opt out of seeking their validation. Build your own skill stack, build your own local tribe of competent men.
And just let the crumbling system collapse entirely on its own.
Don't catch a falling knife, let it fall.
Don't just get angry, get competent. It is the one specific line from the book that really stuck with me long after I finished it.
Because it is the only viable way out. Blind anger just burns you out.
Yeah.
But quiet competence. Competence builds empires.
Listen to everyone listening out there. We have covered a truly massive amount of ground in the last hour. But I'm telling you straight up, we missed 90% of the actual detail.
Easily 90%.
The dense historical letters The specific state-by-state case law citations, the detailed economic charts and tax strategies, it is all deeply laid out in the book itself.
Right, and if this conversation made your blood boil today, or even if it just made a sudden light bulb go off in your head, you owe it to yourself to get the primary source material.
Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now, the minute this deep dive ends.
Buy The Feminist Economy by Conrad Riker. Read it carefully, highlight it, take notes,
It is literally a manual for survival in the modern matrix.
and leave a 5-star review once you read it. The ideological mob will absolutely try to cancel this book and wipe it from the storefronts.
The reviews are the shield.
The reviews keep it visible for the next guy who needs to wake up.
And make sure you stay plugged into the larger movement. Go follow @Conrad Riker on Substack right now.
The cultural war is genuinely just beginning.
We are unplugging you one deep dive at a time. Thank you for listening today. Stay competent, stay dangerous, and we will see you on the next deep dive.